Most PMs are so focused on the roadmap that they actually miss out on the big picture. It's very important to step back, understand from the shoes of the CEO or from the head of the marketing or from the shoes of a CFO. Why are they trying to solve a particular problem?
Gautham Krishnan, the head of product at Disney Hotstar, where he oversees one of the world's largest live streaming platforms. In this conversation, Gautham shares how he transformed challenges into opportunities, from scaling startups to leading teams at global tech giants.
You're never late to the party if you know deeply about consumer insights, if you clearly know about the channels to reach them. Apple is not the first person to build a smartphone. Google was not first to build a search engine. Facebook was not the first social media product.
We also uncover how Gautham uses trust and alignment to drive product strategy in complex organizations.
One of the most important things that product people should care about is trust building in an organization. If you have the trust of the stakeholders, you will be able to align the organization in the right direction.
And his insights on product leadership will change how you think about delivering impact.
I'm a firm believer in the fact that the number of features really don't matter. It's about the features that matter that makes the difference. So you can build 50 different features, but it will not move the needle.
Gautham also dives deep into frameworks for unlocking growth and solving tough problems.
Marty Cagan has phenomenally talked about well from a framework standpoint. There are typically 4 risks that exist in any product. There is a usability risk, execution risk, business value risk, there is a consumer value risk, right?
Whether you're a PM just starting out or a seasoned leader, this episode is packed with actionable advice.
So product sense is a very loosely defined term, but product sense is thinking deeply about every product that you interact with. As in, the starting point for me which is just start questioning why something is built in a particular fashion.
Welcome to today's episode of the Product Growth Podcast. I have one of those product leaders that I've looked up to. He leads the product teams at Disney Hotstar. He supports 100+ million user live streams, 30% of India's bandwidth. He's been a VP of product at GamesKraft and at CloudBees. He's been a director of product at Snapdeal. Gautham Krishnan, welcome.
Thank you, Aakash. Thanks for having me here today.
So what I really want to pick your brain on, because you're a senior product leader, is product strategy. And what I want to do is first, if you had a junior PM on your team who's getting the feedback, you need to be more strategic, how would you guide them?
What I've seen is that most PMs are so focused on the roadmap that they actually miss out on the big picture. And big picture is not required all the time also, but it's important and required, especially when you think about long-term planning. And what I mean by long-term planning is typically, if you're in a big organization, it's, let's say, 6 to 9 months. If you're in a startup, it's most likely between 2 to 3 months. Instead of getting stuck, if you're especially a senior leader in the organization, it's very important to step back, understand from the shoes of the CEO or from the head of the marketing or from the shoes of a CFO. Why are they trying to solve a particular problem? What is most important for them? Understand the big picture. You should always know what's happening in the ground, but how do we connect product insights to the bigger objectives of the organization? And I am a strong believer of product-led growth, and I strongly believe that any financial objective can be tied by understanding the right product metrics and by understanding the right consumer insights.
This episode is brought to you by Xplo, a game changer for customer-facing analytics and data reporting. Are your users craving more dashboards, reports, and analytics within your product? Are you tired of building it yourself? As a product leader, you probably have these requests on your roadmap, but the struggle to prioritize them is real. Building analytics from scratch can be a time-consuming, expensive, and challenging process. Enter Xplo. Xplo is a fully white label, embedded analytics solution designed entirely with your user in mind. Getting started is easy. Expo connects to any relational database or warehouse, and with its low-code functionality, you can build and style dashboards in minutes. Once you're ready, embed the dashboard or report into your app with a tiny code snippet. The best part? Your end user can use Explo's AI features for their own report and dashboard generation, eliminating customer data requests for your support team. Build and embed a fully white-labeled analytics experience in days. Try it free at explo.co. That's explo.co. This episode is brought to you by Adio, the next generation CRM. Imagine a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and actually intuitive. Adio makes that a reality. As I've profiled in the Product Growth newsletter, setting up Adio takes less than a minute, and within seconds of syncing your email and calendar, you'll see your relationships in one place, enriched with valuable data, including things like relationship strength. Adio lets you build Zapier-style automations, create powerful reports, and works for any go-to-market motion, from PLG to sales-led. Adio is designed for the next era of companies like yours. And companies like yours shouldn't have to deal with inflexible, one-size-fits-all CRMs. Join industry leaders like 11 Labs, Replicate, and Modal. Head to adio.com/productgrowth and you'll get 15% off your first year. That's attio.com/productgrowth.
We will be able to support strongly the business objectives. And that's when you think about the big picture. And that's how you communicate to the CEO back, saying that, I am able to help you achieve your bigger picture by doing these 5 things, because it completely and, correctly aligns with your objectives of X revenue growth, of, Y user growth, and, Z outcomes, right? So many times what I feel is folks get stuck in roadmaps and features. They never take time out to understand the big picture. Think from first principles about what does X million user growth mean for you? How is it going to help achieve the overall business objectives?
And I think that the thing that PMs most struggle with here is that their manager or their manager's manager, or the executive team often determines the roadmap on
Right.
top of that.
Right.
So it's very hard to feel like you have any autonomy, or to use the language of Marty Cagan, you have any empowerment
Right.
around your roadmap. How do PMs deal with this reality?
So this is a tough topic, right? Because every organization is different. The stage of evolution of every organization is different. So there is no standard, fits all answer. But what a PM can aspire to be in is keep asking the question of why thing is important, or why should I do what I'm supposed to do, right? You will always be told what to do if you don't have a clear POV and articulation of what you should be doing. So I think the most important thing for a PM who's in a similar situation is to deeply think about what are they really trying to achieve, and the ability to articulate that in a very clear and continuous and probably in a sustaining manner over multiple weeks, months, so that the senior management understands what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, and what is the expected outcome that you can deliver.
Is there any tools or techniques you use? Like, one of the techniques I often coach people on is the planning before the planning.
Right.
Before you hit the planning period, actually have your planning ready so that
Right.
during the planning period, you can play politics.
Right.
Or another technique I often use is like, have your query your currency. What is our currency as PMs? Data and user insights.
Right.
And bring those to executives. Are there any other tools and techniques you would double click on for PMs?
So one of the things that I strongly believe in is reviewing what you have shipped, right, over the last quarter. What are the learnings? Creating annual summaries, quarterly summaries, monthly summaries of what has shipped, sharing the knowledge, and, correcting yourself. I'll just elaborate that. Many times product managers think they are doing the right thing, but the rest of the organization is not able to understand or follow them. And this is, in my mind, a big gap because of lack of communication or lack of ability to articulate the problem statements or the solutions that you're doing wider across the organization. So what I constantly tell my PMs is it is not for you. So, putting a retrospective out, putting a product release note out, putting a note on what worked, what did not work, and presenting them in public forums, and especially to senior leadership, is extremely important because you have to level up, I would say, level up the rest of the organization to the level of your thought process, right? And that's what is missing in many of these organizations. The growth team is thinking in isolation. The marketing team is thinking in isolation. The ops team is thinking in isolation. The leadership is thinking in isolation. And many times, it is not only important that the product managers do the right thing, but they also help others understand what is the right way to solve a problem. And I think this is one of the most important jobs of a product leader also, to bring the leadership and the other stakeholders onboarded to the ways of how product team work. Now, I'm not saying that it's an easy thing to do, but if we are able to do it, then you will actually be in control of your roadmap. Otherwise, you will never be in control of your roadmap.
So you said as a startup, you need to realize that you're never late to the party if you have a solid product strategy.
Right.
Explain.
So this is something that I've been in startups for quite some time, and I've been advising a bunch of startups also. And this is more from my own experience and by observing what's happening around me, which is that many times we feel that it's too tough to enter a sector or a category. And even if you're a senior leader within an organization, you think that, some markets are already conquered. There is nothing much value that you can add to those particular segments. But as history would prove it, Apple is not the first person to build the iPhone or a smartphone. Google was not first to build a search engine. Facebook was not the first social media product. And as recent as now, Twitch was not the first streaming platform to be out there, right? So you're never late to the party if you know deeply about consumer insights, if you clearly know about the channels to reach them, and if you can clearly create a product that provides value to that segment of users. TikTok is another great example. When we thought that the video wars are over, we have suddenly seen Facebook video, we have seen TikTok, we have seen Instagram Shorts, YouTube themselves have come up with Reels, etc. And each of these products cater to specific user personas, user segments. The algorithms actually are fine-tuned for certain user categories and certain user behaviors. One of them is very different from the other. You know why you go to Instagram and scroll versus why you go to YouTube and scroll versus why you go to TikTok and scroll. Because the entire user experience is very, very different, right? So that's my thesis. As in, if you are at any point in time, you feel that there is no opportunity left in the market, I would suggest that rethink, because there always exists an opportunity, especially when markets grow. So if I have to elaborate that, I'm going to take a few more minutes, if that's fine. Yeah. So if I have to elaborate that, every market when it grows gets fragmented. Fragmented based on consumer behavior, fragmented based on income levels of the users, fragmented based on geography, fragmented based on demographic data, etc. And so if you are able to understand those fragments very clearly and tie up these 4 parts of the value chain, which is, what demographics, what's the income category, what is the behaviors, what are the like, and why do you exist? If you're able to understand and define these 4 parameters, you will be able to come up with products that actually solve for it. Another example that I can talk about is, when we think that Uber has conquered the car hailing or the auto hailing market, but in India recently there have been a few disruptive models that have emerged. We have something called as BluSmart, which is a purely EV fleet, which is completely company owned. The drivers are also in their pay. And for them, the value of service is that it's 100% guaranteed booking. If you book it and if the cab is confirmed, you can be assured that it's going to be there 100% of the time. So as a user, especially if you look at a market like India, the biggest challenge was, the cars are not clean, the drivers are probably going to cancel on you, the prices fluctuate, and obviously the comfort is a little low on IC engines. So what BluSmart has done is that it's all going to be company owned. There is quality assurance on the services side. There is assurance on the ride aspect, and especially when we are in a place where there is far more demand than the supply that is available. There is a premiumization of the market that will happen, and they are getting that premium audience, and they are growing like 100% year on year at this point in time in India.
So let's break that example down a little bit, because I think people don't understand what product strategy is. They often just give you a corporate strategy and they say this is a product strategy. So what are the elements of that Uber competitor that define their product strategy?
Right. So I think let's look at Uber is a market leader for cab hailing, right? But what are the challenges with Uber? One is that the drivers are not happy. The passengers are not happy because they don't get a cab when they want it, because cabs are either not up to the mark in terms of quality, or they don't show up, or the drivers cancel, or it's not available all the time. And thirdly, pricing, and fourthly, let's say the comfort of the vehicle itself, right? Many of them are very old vehicles that are being chauffeured around. So if I look at these four as the primary challenges that Uber faces, although and let's put a business model aspect to how Uber operates, right? Uber operates in a very marketplace model where they don't have any overheads on the asset side of things, whereas most of their cost is on the people side of it, the technology side of it, the marketing side of it. Right. But now, if you take a very long-term or a value chain sort of a POV, what is the biggest cost in this entire value chain? Which is the vehicle cost, the fuel cost, and maybe the compensation that the driver is expected to get. Right. Now, if you take a value chain approach with an electric vehicle, you actually solve for a lot of things on the asset management side of it, the OpEx side of it. Because you have an electric vehicle that has very low operating expenses, you might be able to offer a lower price to the consumers. But it doesn't stop there, especially in a country like India, where affordability of a vehicle is a challenge. Most of the drivers who work with, let's say, an Uber or an Ola, or many of the other cab hailing services in India, get vehicles that are not up to the mark, or they don't make enough money to keep it in top-notch shape. And that's also where this new competitor called BluSmart is innovating, where they are saying that I'm not only going to keep a vehicle as an EV, but I'm going to own it and I'm going to maintain it. The consumer experience within the vehicle will continue to be good. I'm not only going to do that, I'm going to also keep the drivers in my payroll. I'm going to train them to be consumer first, rather than somebody who's just a part-time gig worker who's driving around a cab. I'm going to have chauffeur-driven cabs who are trained in this. And despite all of this, I'm going to start charging premium also, because consumers are assured a cab whenever they book. So if I book and a cab is confirmed, you can be rest assured that it's going to show up. You can plan it ahead, you can schedule it, etc. And the consistency of experience, which is whether it's a vehicle, whether it's the interior of the vehicle, whether it's the driver that is going to, chauffeur you around, all of them are maintained from a consistency of quality standpoint. So there are no untoward incidents that happen. You're not getting into a car that is dirty. So in my mind, and considering the market has grown so well, and especially when you come up with a premiumization strategy, there is always an opportunity to capture market share. Not only market share, maybe even revenue share. So that's what has happened with this. competitor in India where they have really out innovated on exactly the pain points of consumers. And, at least in India, there was a dearth of cabs, right? So, but people were not finding good quality cabs. They were finding it too pricey. The drivers are misbehaving, etc., etc. So that's where, in my mind, a POV, a deep consumer insight, and a product journey. So when I say product, I'm not only talking about the technology as the software aspect of it. For me, this entire value chain is a product because consumers are sitting inside a vehicle and experiencing it. And if you're able to control that entire value chain through innovation, that is where a product strategy really creates a business outcome.
So product strategy, it sounds like there's a specific user group they've targeted. There's a specific insight around that user group, and then they've structured their business model around it. Is that kind of the key elements of a product strategy?
Across the value chain, I think you need to have a value chain approach. You need to think about where do consumers exist. So in this case, let me take a step back. So in this case, there are three people in the value chain. There is the organization who aggregates the demand for consumers and drivers. Then on the other side, there are consumers who are looking for a good quality cab hailing service. And on the other side, there are drivers who are trying to make an extra income. And they want to, take their vehicle or do cab hailing services, right? So when you look at this three value chain, how do you optimize that entire value chain? Before just making it a marketplace was the right optimization model. And that's where Uber innovated, because the traditional cab guys had a lot of licensing cost. The prices were not appropriate. Again, demand and availability was not there because you couldn't get them with ease at the click of a button, right? But when the market has matured, let's say 15 years now later, we need to rethink what a new experience would look like. And what does that premiumization look like? Because the technology has evolved, the underlying assets have evolved, people have evolved, their needs and wants have constantly evolved.
So we've defined what a product strategy is. Where I find a lot of people trip up is how to share that product strategy. We've had some different guests on the podcast who have had different thoughts around it. Satyajit Salgar at Google, he prefers a document, but a very concise document. Ravi Mehta, who is CPO at Tinder, he really prefers visuals.
Right.
His point is every strategy document needs 25 visuals. What should a good product strategy actually look like?
Got it. So as with any product answer, there is no single answer here. So it all depends on the audience. And the audience is also a function of the people of your organization. So many CEOs or CXOs are very visually oriented. So they would prefer something that is a lot more visual than something that is a lot more, let's say, textual in nature. So again, depending upon your audience, you have to craft a document that helps you clarify why you're doing what you're doing, right? So for me, product strategy is a document that will help everybody else in the organization rally to a common goal on why we are doing what we are doing. And this relates to the earlier question that you asked, which is a lot of people, product managers say that they are being told what to do and they don't have the agency to decide why they're doing or what they should be doing. And I feel that one of the most important things from a product strategy document that, when I say product strategy could be at a organizational level, it could be for a pod, it could be for the piece of experience or the piece of product area or the charter that you're looking at. So product strategy can exist at all levels, right? And for me, it's a document that clarifies. It clarifies why you're doing what you're doing. It helps align every other stakeholder who's your counterpart, who's above you, who's below you, in an organization to rally around common objective, right?
Does that mean that your product strategy could take multiple forms depending on the audience? Do you often create a document and a presentation?
Yeah. So in fact, so again, depending upon the audience, so there is an internal document that we make within the product team that is very exhaustive. So there we think about, what is the business objective? The business goals, the financial outcomes that we are looking at, how does it translate into product metrics, right? So most financial numbers, you can convert them into mathematical equations, right? So for example, from an e-commerce organization, revenue is a function of number of transacting people into average order per transaction, right? It's as simple as that. So subsequently, if you want to achieve, let's say, 2x growth, you need either 2x the number of people who are transacting or twice the average order value, right? It's as simple as that. So thinking from first principles, if you know what is your financial goal for the next year, you can define clear. So this you keep translating till it becomes a product objective or an OKR. You say that, for me, I know the upper threshold for user growth is, let's say, 25%, which means that if I have to 2x the revenue, I need to probably increase my order value by maybe 75% to achieve an overall growth, 25% here, 75% there. So maybe I'll hit 2x the total revenue for the next year, right? So what I'm trying to communicate is that at every level of the product, you will be able to define what are those key product metrics that you need to chase. So you will know what is the product metric to chase, but you will not know where that opportunity space exists. So this is your objective function. Your objective function is to, let's say, 2x number of users. Now, how will you 2x those users? That is where deep consumer insight comes into the picture, which is you cohortize the users, you figure out, do you want to go after your power users who may not have too much of an upside from a user standpoint, but they may have an upside from a revenue standpoint. Whereas you will have a lot of low engaged users who probably you can increase the number of users there by giving them an additional experience or solving for one of their core needs to maybe 2x the number of low engaged users, but their revenue per user may not increase, right? And then there is a big leaky bucket where there is every product in my mind has a lot of survivorship bias, which is people who use the product are the people for which you are constantly building the product for. Right? So you always need to look at the people who churn out and then try to understand how do you expand the pie. Why are these, and an average per product will have at least 50% of people who will install it but never uses it, right? And most of the time they would have spent an average of maybe a minute to explore the product, right? So understand that. Why are these people coming from? Is it a channel problem? Is it a product market fit for that particular channel problem? Like, can we reallocate resources to more performing channels, right? Or is it an opportunity that we are not seeing? Is there, what are these people really looking for? Can we do user interviews, right? So because the data of those users will not be in the system. So you will never optimize for those users. So this is where you need to have an outside-in perspective to understand why is that leaky bucket existing? What are the additional things that you can do to optimize either the channel or the product market fit, or some experiences that we're completely missing or some user journeys that we are missing.
What I find is that the tools we're given tend to determine the paths we take. The tools we're given, analytics, we have amplitude,
correct,
session replays, we have that tool, full story,
right,
heat map, we have our hot jar, and user discovery. We might even go talk to customers, but we usually talk to our existing customers.
Correct.
And so we tend to neglect these groups that have just churned out,
right,
or maybe they even just visited our website and they never even converted, right? So they're potential prospects. What are your favorite techniques for getting insights from those user groups?
So I would say that, techniques are always, talking. So, one is a data so there are three layers or three approaches that we can take, right? One is data that'll tell you what people are doing within the product. Just look at the user flow. Try to put hypotheses as to why people are dropping off at each point of the journey, and then try to postulate what are the potential solutions that you can do. One is the user journey mapping. The second is looking at the data and further cohortizing it to understand within these user journeys, how are different cohorts behaving differently? right? That'll give you a lot more insight that may not be apparent when you look at a standard funnel, right? And the third is it's always important to look at feedback. So getting feedback is very, very important. And what I would urge is a caution, especially when it comes from the customer support side of the business. In my mind, the role of a customer support agent is to close a ticket, not to solve a problem, right? And many times, when you look at the customer complaint numbers, you will see that this complaint has been resolved in, let's say, 2 minutes, one day. The average stat for a turnaround is 30 minutes. Many times the problem may have not been solved. The tickets have been closed in 30 minutes. The tickets have been closed in 2 minutes, right? The escalations are probably 5. So what I would urge, especially if you are in an early stage startup, is work very closely with the customer support team. In fact, I would go one step forward and say that, be the customer support agent and listen to customer queries and try to figure out why are customers complaining about a particular thing, right? Solve for it very, very deeply, because what you get from an agent or from a standard report that the customer support team shares may not be the truth, right? Because their objectives are different. They're there to close tickets, not to solve customer problems. So yeah.
So let's say I want to do a study of customers who've just visited the product for 30 seconds, for example. Let's take I know you built a lot of casual and real money games in your last gig. How would you approach decreasing the amount of people who leave after 30 seconds?
Right. So this is again a very tough problem, right? So the first thing that you do is the channels, right? There will be a lot of efficient channels. What I would say, typically when the number of, I would say, no engaged users in the platform increases, it's because there is a channel inefficiency. Some new marketing channel has opened up, or one existing channel has become less efficient, right? So that's the first port of call that you have to look at. But more importantly, from a product standpoint, the only way to look for them is potentially, one of the things that we did is retargeting with a customer survey, right? Because there is no way to trace these users because you have no contact number, you have no email ID, you have nothing about that particular user, right? So instead of just remarketing them with a standard, come back to the product, why don't you send them a customer survey report? Let's see how many of them respond to that. Obviously, the number of people who will respond to that will be very, very less. But that is one way to potentially collect data, right? But if you have any other sources of data, you can also look at, let's say, market research agencies or surveys where you find similar audiences who are using similar products and try to understand, what do you think about this product? How do you feel about it? Get some initial inhibitions, etc. Right? Because what I also feel is many times it's not the product, right, that is at fault. You will have a world-class product, but still people will not use it, right? Because people are creatures of habit. They would be using an arcane system, but they are so used to that they don't want to switch, right? So even if you have the best-in-class product that is out there, people may not use it, but that may not be the target segment also that you're focusing. So there would be occasion where people will come to your product, browse around, experience it. But these are a few ways that I would think about it.
So if you're a product manager and you come into a company and there is a product strategy, let's say even you're a director of product and you're reporting to the VP of product who's written the VP of product strategy, how do you assess if that product strategy is actually solid?
Right. So I would say that if you're new to the organization and if you're a PM, focus first on building your credibility in the system, right? Because no one's going to listen to you unless they trust you, right? So I think the first order of the business, if you're new to any organization, is deliver, right? Deliver, build credibility, over-communicate, have clear framing of problem statements in conversations, listen to others, um, understand what are their inhibitions, their concerns, their problem statements, what is the POV from which they are coming in. Because you think you know the strategy, but you may not really know why something is being done, right? And in most organizations that have evolved over a period of time, there is no dearth of ideas, right? And yeah, this is something funny that I was talking to somebody else, which said that the roadmap changes over multiple quarters, but over multiple years, the roadmaps remain the same because some of the big ideas still there. It keeps coming back to the roadmap every year uh, and get debated and evaluated, but then probably get low prioritized, and somebody else after a few years will come back and say that no, this is the big best. This is the best idea that we should try again, right? So the first order of business, if you're a new PM, is to, deliver first, build value, build trust, over communicate, help understand others, their problems better, help yourself understand why they're coming from certain POVs. And maybe after 6 months, you'll be able to influence the strategy, right? Or what we are doing.
This episode is brought to you by Interpret. Interpret unifies all your customer interactions, from Gong calls to Zendesk tickets to Twitter threads and App Store reviews, making them available for comprehensive analysis. As we've profiled in the newsletter, it's the trusted choice of product organizations like Canva, Notion, and Descript. They rely on Interpret to drive forward their voice of customer programs. What makes Interpret special is its ability to, 1, build customer-specific AI models that provide more accurate categorization. 2, connect customer feedback directly to revenue impact so you can prioritize confidently. And 3, uncover insights with their Wisdom AI Copilot so you have an intuitive chat interface to access your data. So if you want a custom model built for your organization, get in touch with the team at interpret.com/product growth. That's ENTERPRET.com/product growth.
Okay. And how do you know after 6 months that the strategy is good or not?
So you will never know unless you execute it. That's the first thing. But let's say, I'm a firm believer in the fact that the number of features really don't matter. It's about the features that matter that makes the difference, right? So you can build 50 different features, but it will not move the needle, right? And this is where probably I'll talk about my gaming experience also, which is the big change in my mental model that has happened because of gaming is I've stopped thinking about products as a journey or as a flow, right? I've started thinking them as, let's say, loops, because in gaming, if you think about it, if a user is bored, I can do a million things, right? But within that, I said, okay, let me play a game, right? But within a gaming category, there are like hundreds of categories of games, different, from casual to mid-core to, hardcore gaming that is available in each of those categories also. But then why would somebody come to your play not just once, but many, many times over? And every time when he feels bored, he's not opening an Instagram, he's not opening a YouTube, he's not going to a social media site, but coming back to your product. He's not going to an Amazon to buy something, but coming back to a game to play something that has technically no value other than the happiness that you get, when you play it, right? So it is very intangible. So now what is product strategy in this, right? How do you define it? So it's very, very, I would say, very superficial. It's both science and art, is how I would put it. Very esoteric for many cases. But the right way to do it is if you see the needle moving, if you see that the leadership has strong alignment on what are the objective problems to be solved for, objectives and the problems to be solved for, I would say that the strategy is in place, right? But if you keep moving from one crisis to the next, quarter over quarter, without any line of sight on who our user is, why are we solving it, what is in it for them, what is the right monetization path, etc. I would say that maybe it is time to stop shipping and starting a step a little back and think deeply, right, about what are we doing, why are we doing, etc.
So it sounds like thinking deeply here is the key, getting deep user insight. We keep coming up with that. How can PMs train themselves
Right.
to get these deep user insights?
So second order thinking is the rule, right? As in, I'm just saying, and
For those who don't know, what is second order thinking?
so second order thinking is thinking about what is immediately beyond the first level of impact. So for example, let's say I can build a product that will increase engagement by X percentage. So let's say, okay, let me take a step back. So if I have to build a product that will increase engagement, I will say that, okay, create a new visual layout that will improve the CTR, right? So I'm hoping that by clicking more or by making people click more, I'm going to help achieve the final engagement that I'm looking for in a video platform, in a social media, in a game, etc. Right? But do you really think just increasing the CTR will lead to eventually an engagement outcome? May not be true, right? That in my mind, second order thinking. So you start from what is your eventual outcome that you're looking for? You're looking for engagement improvement. So you take, obviously this is thinking backward from the outcome that you're looking for, but many times once roadmaps are set, people forget why they are building what they're building, right? So people will say that, okay, this is a roadmap that I've come up with. This is what I've aligned the management with. These are the 10 things that I will do to improve engagement on. I said, I've tried these 5 things. These are not improving, but I'm going to continue to do the next 5 things because that's what I've got aligned myself on, right? So this is where, let's say, the second order thinking comes into the picture, where I really think, and this is very closely tied to, let's say, a pre-mortem, right, that we do typically before experiments, where, and this is something that I also very, very strongly say or communicate to the team. And there are there are nuances to this argument also. So if you're a startup, you should always have a bias for experiments. You should always, because your organization can afford it, right? Because experiments also in my mind is a cost of doing business. You are, for good features, you're not shipping them 100% to all the users at the fastest pace possible. For bad features, you're reducing the impact, so you're balancing risk. Many of the other features also takes time to ship because you are running certain experiments. So for me, experiments is cost of doing business for big organizations. So it is very important that we do a pre-mortem. We really do, I would say, thought experiments before coming up with actual experiments. It's not to stop doing experimentation, right? It's not to advocate for stopping experiments. It's to understand really whether this is the right experiment setup that we need to do or the right feature to drive those outcomes, right? Because, it's always easy to run an experiment, look at the data, and then say that, okay, it's not working, right? And typically in a big organization, this is 3 months or a quarter or more, right? Whereas in a startup, it might be a month, right? So especially when it comes to larger organizations, it's very, very important that we do pre-mortem. It's very important that we do, thought experiments a lot more deeply, which will help us achieve the second order thinking that we currently don't have, because everybody is very, I would say, action biased, right? To getting shipped rather than shipping the right ones, right? So again, there are a lot of nuances, but the corollary to this is that people use these to stall initiatives also, right? So that's the safeguarding that you have to be aware of. It shouldn't be used to stall initiatives at an organization level. It should be with an intent to actually make our experiments the right one, anticipate what can go wrong, and fix it before even the experiment is actually set up, so that our time to market is substantially reduced.
So it sounds like the pre-mortem is a very critical part of developing this deep insight and
Absolutely.
muscle. So what are the big mistakes people make about a pre-mortem? When is the right time to do a pre-mortem, and how should you run it?
So the typical way that we at least follow is, we have a one pager on what we want to run, or why we are doing what we are doing. Then we start looking at the writing the PRD, etc. And that is also where you can do external validation, right? External validation can be a function of this is something that Marty Cagan has phenomenally talked about well from a framework standpoint. There are typically 4 risks that exist in any product, right? There is a usability risk, there is an execution risk, there is a business value risk, and there is a consumer value risk, right? So the first one is whether the product that you build is usable or not. The second is whether the product that you're building is valuable for the business or not. The third is whether you can build what you need within the execution capability that we have within the timelines that we're looking at. And the fourth is whether the product that you're building is valuable for the user, right? So this is a great framework that I use, and that I try to tell everybody to use from a pre-mortem standpoint, because it covers all the 4 key ingredients that you need to think about before doing any initiative, right? Now, depending upon the complexity of the initiative and the criticality of the initiative and how many stakeholders are involved, if it is just a color change on a button, maybe you don't need all 4 of them. You will go with an action bias there. But if it is a completely new feature that is going to take 3 months or 50% of the engineering resource that you have, maybe you need to have a very detailed understanding of all of these elements, right? So you do a usability test, you do a prototyping test, you deeply look at the data, you do consumer research, right? Before you come up with whether this is something that you really want to do, and at least, do you know the risks that you're taking? We are all for risk. Ideally, we shouldn't normalize because of so one more thing that typically happens is, because so many feedback is given, you try to move away from the initial proposal itself, right? And you will come up with an average product, which is a mediocre product, right? So you should resist doing that. You should resist this becoming an opportunity to block somebody else from innovating. So these are the safeguards that you need to build from a cultural aspect, from a product culture aspect. But you need to be very clear what are the risks, whether you know what are the risks, at least are 80% of the risk covered, so that you are set up for success, right? And then when you put 50% of your bandwidth, you can be rest assured that most of the time those experiments will be successful.
So who should be in the pre-mortem, and should it be pre or post design?
So as I told you, it can be at various stages. It can start from a user research itself. We can have a prototype testing. We can, where the design team is already involved. It could be just a data science or a data analytics insight or product analytics insight, where you look at all the user flows and see that, okay, now if I want to deliver 10% impact, do these cohorts, or do you expect these cohorts to have the impact because of the data or the behavior that you see? So I would say that this is again a function of the stage of the experiment, the complexity of the experiment, the resources that it takes to run that experiment. If it's a small color change on a CTA, maybe it's just an overnight experiment that you just do with nobody else, not even a manager being aware of. But if it's a major initiative that's going to take 50% of the engineering bandwidth, maybe you involve almost everybody, right? That's how I would place it.
So you've built product strategy at startups, you've built product strategy at larger companies. What is the difference? How does the formation of that differ, and how does the packaging and presentation differ?
Got it. So startups are typically founder driven, right? That's the main caveat here. So, and founders have strong intuition on certain aspects because they so passionately believe in their problem statement. They have access to information that you probably may not have access to because of their network, because of their peer group, because of other founders, et cetera, right? So, so it is very important that you come up with a product strategy very closely working with the founder of the organization, because they will have strong feedback on certain aspects and what they want to achieve, right? You can influence them. You can influence them as to what is an important priority versus potentially that can be prioritized lower. But probably I would say that in a startup, it is more working very closely and championing for the outcomes of the founder than coming up with something, I would say, a little more independent from a thought process or from a stakeholder alignment standpoint. Whereas in a bigger organization, I would say that there is a leadership team or a management team with each stakeholder having their own objective functions or optimizations to achieve. So you work very collaboratively with them, understand their pain points, and when you come up with, so you understand their problem statements. And as I said, there are two approaches here again. One is an outside-in view, where you see the market evolving, you see the competitive landscape changing, you see how consumer behaviors are changing, and how do we sort of expand our market? How do we build adjacencies? So that's probably not what the team might be thinking about. The team would be thinking about, how do we make a better product of what we already have, with minor innovations here and there, right? But as a product leader, what you have to keep an eye out for is, how's the competitive landscape? What is the market looking like? What are the new competitors? How are new consumer paradigms evolving and expanding? And incorporate that.
So one thing that I think Marty, Cagan, and the broader product community might differ on is Marty says product leaders should build product strategy. And you just mentioned how important the product leader role is. But where we started was how PMs are getting the feedback that they're not being strategic. So what is it? Like, how do we kind of reconcile these perspectives?
So I think trust, in my mind, like one of the most important things that product people should care about is trust building in an organization, right? Because if you have the trust of the stakeholders, you will be able to align the organization in the right direction or in the manner that you want them to be aligned on, right? So a majority of my time from a leadership standpoint is helping them, helping each of the business leaders achieve the outcomes that they are looking for, right? While helping the product team align the objectives with the broader mandates of the product organization, right? So building trust so that you can be in any meeting transparently communicating what you think about the business strategy and how we should evolve as an organization. Plus working very closely with the PMs so that they build their own stakeholder management trust and I would say, the ability to influence at their own, I would say hierarchical levels. I would say this is the most important thing. So because we are all distributed and, unfortunately, this is also a truth about product management, which is that we are all isolated, right? Product management is probably the only organization where most of us are working in silos because there is very clear differentiation of what you are supposed to do versus what I'm supposed to do. especially at the junior level. And our best buddies would be people in design, in engineering, in analytics. These are the people that we hang out with the most of the time, except for the few social occasions or stand-ups or meetings where all the PMs come together, right? It is very unlike in any of the other teams. The marketing team sits together, they work together. Engineering team sits together, work together. Whereas product teams may be sitting together, but they would definitely be not working together unless a collaboration is required, right? So they would be driving their own roadmaps, their own objectives, agendas, etc. So in this case, influence is a function of who you know within the organization. And even if you have the most brilliant strategy in place, you will not be able to influence it unless you have support from your peer group, which is the product management team itself, unless you have support or unless your execution team is not willing to support you in that endeavor to show some early outcomes, right? So I would say that do what it takes, and trust in my mind is a function of, at least for junior roles, the ability to deliver, right? Deliver outcomes, right? So deliver outcomes, build trust, and the most important thing is, the ability to communicate and probably over-communicate so that, these successes are not just in your mind, but spread across the organization more wider.
When it comes to delivering outcomes, what I've found in my 16 years in product management is the most important thing is being able to push back.
Right.
When you discover through your user research, through your data, that this feature isn't going to have the impact executives want, right. You have to go back to them. What are the hard-won lessons you've had in your career about how to do that effectively?
Right. So I think pushback is a very touchy subject for product managers because it can both aid you and can, negatively affect you. Because how it aids you is very, very clear because you're razor focused on what really matters and what you're able to push. But it can negatively affect you because in many organizations when the product managers are the front end, what I mean by that is they are fronting the engineering team, they are talking on behalf of the design team, they are talking on behalf of many other teams. They are considered to be an impediment for growth. Many times I've heard feedback being said that, the product team is not cooperating, from some of the senior leadership saying that, I want this to be achieved and I know that this will work, but your team is not helping me, right? Why don't you talk to your team and, get it aligned, right? So this is a very tricky topic. And this goes back to the initial thing that I talked about. It's very important to build credibility and trust as early as possible in an organization and try up-leveling your peers or your stakeholders to the level of thought process that you have, right? And that's where real product-led growth comes into the picture. We always say product-led growth. And the biggest impediment that I've seen to product-led growth is the product team is amazing. They are data-oriented. They look at consumer research, consumer insight. They really have a clear POV on what works, what doesn't work. But none of their stakeholders are aligned to that thought process, right? So as a senior leader, as in I'm not even saying at my level, maybe even at a mid-management level, the most important objective is to upskill the thought process of your immediate peer group to the thought process that you have. Spend time, spend talking with them, help them think through the thought process that you have. Don't come to a meeting with a conclusion. Give them enough breadcrumbs so that they will come to the same conclusion as you, right? And if you keep doing it for a series of time, you will start, you will start seeing that they will also start thinking in your line of thought, right? And that's the only way to give the right pushback and they take it positively rather than negatively and say that, the product team is not helping, right? Or they're not helping me achieve my objectives because they are saying no to these 5 things that I've requested them to do.
The one difficulty I've had with this approach, the breadcrumb, the inception approach, is managing my time. It becomes so hard if you're gonna just to convince senior VP of marketing over
Right.
5 meetings instead of just tell him the right answer.
Right.
So how do you think about that? How do you think about, I have execution to do, I have to get my own insights on my strategy, and now here we're talking about I need to convince people of my strategy. How do you kind
Right.
of weigh all these different things we're required to do as PMs?
So, this is something that I also do, which is, similar to the pre-mortem that we talked about. There is a pre-alignment also that can happen, right? So before any important meeting, the objections should not reveal itself in the meeting. The objections should be heard before the meeting itself and should be aligned as much as possible. I'm not saying 100% is aligned, as much as possible before the meeting itself. So that when everybody comes together, you all not only know the apprehensions of your counterparts, you may have an answer by this time when the meeting happens that, how you tackle those aspirations or apprehensions. Maybe you talk about these apprehensions to the decision maker of that meeting. If there is a CEO, if there is a VP of marketing, you tell them that, I talked to your counterparts, your team members. These are the 5 things that they talked about. And these are potentially the 3 solutions that I've come up with. But these are 2 things that I'm not aligned with. And I think we need to spend a little more time. And I would also require your help to sort of help me understand this better. From your POV, what are the most important things, right? So what really worked for me is, before any critical meeting, make sure that there is a pre-alignment then. Obviously, these things will take time, right? But if the meeting is that critical, and if you really have to push back on certain things, you need to invest the time on pre-alignment, making sure the inhibitions are, and nobody has a surprise. And even when, let's say I'm meeting the marketing team, I would have talked to all his reportees who are also probably attending that meeting. And I know what are their challenges, and I would have separately pinged the marketing head saying that, I've talked to all of you folks. These are the things that they said. These are the things that I'm not aligned on. We can talk about these things, or if you have any other apprehension, I would love to have a call with you before the meeting so that we are on the same page, right? So, but I'm not saying that this is a definitive answer, but these are approaches that you can think about, because many controversies happen in meetings, which should have happened probably outside the meetings, right? And when you're talking with somebody on a one-on-one basis, a lot more. You can probe a lot more rather than in a meeting where 10 people are sitting and the other person may feel a little offended or challenged that he may not be used to in a public forum, right? So it's always important to connect with those stakeholders on a one-on-one basis, go really deep, really understand, ask them, what are you really trying to solve for? Why does these 2 things really matter to you? Right? And maybe there is a better answer to the solution, and you'll be able to uncover it at that particular point. But, meetings where there are more than 3 people are not the places where you solve problem statements.
It's the meetings where PMs look bad.
Right.
You hire a lot of product managers. What's a really important trait you value in product managers?
I think one of the important traits that I value is not very apparent in interviews, right? And that is something that I try to keep digging in an interview to understand what are those traits which are very difficult to understand but are so critical from a day-to-day operation standpoint, right? And one of the foremost skills that I look for in a PM is consumer obsession, or customer obsession, as you call it, right? The ability to empathize with your users, ability to understand what are the real problem statements that they face. It's very easy to say it, right? But the fact of the matter remains that most of us don't use the products that we build that frequently. We don't dog food our own products. Even if we do dog food, we just test it on our device. We don't try a variety of device. We don't test it on a device that's the most popular device. We don't test it on a device that's probably not that popular. We just try to ship things, but we don't obsess about them, right? So obsession is all about really deeply understanding what are the problems that the users are facing, right? And how is this apparent in interviews? I try to keep digging what they're doing currently. How are they thinking about it? What are the challenges that they're facing? What are the challenges that the consumers are facing? How do they come up with their roadmap? How do they think about when a problem is found? How do they think about solving for that, right? So there is this incident that happened with me where I was facing a bug in my TV at my home, and I raised a bug, but as things would have it, the developers said that it's not reproducible and the bug got closed. But I was constantly able to reproduce it, right, and experience it in my product. I tried remote debugging, but it was still not possible. So I decided that I'll bring my own TV to work one day, right? Uh, and the reason why I do it is not because I'm the leader of the organization, but it's also because I believe that the products that operate at scale. So, for example, let's say we have 200 million monthly average users, active users. So, if there is a problem that is affecting, let's say, a million users, that's a problem that is worth solving for. Now, if you go after the numbers, you may, 1 million is probably not the most important problem to solve for at this particular point in time. But the thought process here is that if this problem can be solved, it may actually solve for a bunch of technical debts that may have occurred or a problem solved that may also be affecting a bunch of other devices, right? Which is probably immeasurable at this point in time. And the first way that things when things or issues are reported is to close them by saying that it's not reproducible. But if you really obsess about your customers, you really care about solving the problems that at least you face, right? And making sure that you take it to a logical conclusion. And this is apparent when you talk to really customer obsessed or consumer obsessed PMs who really know the details. They really know the problems of the product that they're doing. It may not be in the roadmap. It may not be the most important thing that they solve for. But when you ask a 3-level deep question, they will know exactly what the problem is. And I feel that PMs are in a very unique position where they can influence a lot on the product roadmap, but they are also in a position where you will feel demotivated most of the time because it's easy to be blamed for not shipping fast enough. You are working as an IC most of the time. You may not get the organizational resources to support your roadmap or your backlog. So one of the things that keep you motivated is really solving user problems, right? And always trying to be the best at what you are, at the craft of being a product manager. And if you're able to do it, you'll be able to continue in this career for a far longer period of time than people who are not really obsessed about solving the problems or thinking about the products that they build in.
So how do you test for customer obsession in the interview? What are your favorite questions?
So I typically ask open-ended questions about what are they doing, how are they thinking about the problem statements. And typically when they talk about the most important problem that they solve for, I try to dig deeper. I try to see, how deep they know about the problem statement. What are the real consumer insights that they have? Is it superficial or is it really deep, right? So for example, let's say somebody will say that, I want to build, let's say, an engagement product, right? And that person will say that, because the engagement has been dropping, I saw that there is a cohort of users who can be, engaged better because of XYZ initiatives. But is that the real problem to solve for? Like, how do you think about? So there is a difference between problem space and solution space, right? Do they really understand the problem space really deep enough so that the solutions that they're building are a function of those problem statements? So I asked them, why is it not solved in another way, right? Why is it not solved uh, you know, in a different manner. So when I ask these additional questions, many people are not obsessed, stumble. Not able to think, oh yeah, this could be a better option, right? I never thought about it. So I look for people who have thought about multiple ways of solving the same problem and then coming to the solution space because now they have thought deep enough about that problem statement, right? Because it's not that there is only one solution to every problem that you face. So this is potentially a way to figure that out.
Now you're the head product at basically the hottest tech company in India. It's certainly one of the biggest OTT streaming live platforms in the world. Everybody wants to know, how did you get this job?
So I would say that it's, everything I consider everything in life to be a function of being, serendipitous, being at the right place at the right time. And then how do you make that happen? You increase the surface area of your luck, right? So what I would suggest for aspiring product managers or people who are looking for opportunity is try to figure out how you can increase the surface area of your opportunity space. You know, is it through a regular recruiter? Is it through connecting with people? Is it through sharing your own thoughts on a space like a LinkedIn or Twitter or any of these spaces? You need to think about how you can increase the area of your opportunity, right? And then I think I would say go fast at the things that really make sense so that you go with an intent to take the opportunity that is given to you.
Was it LinkedIn for you? What really increased the surface area of luck for you such that you were able to nab this job?
So I think so it's a bunch of coincidences. Somebody reached out to me, then I got connected. At a senior level, most of them are inbound at this point in time, right? So it's mostly like inbound, somebody reaching out to me, I evaluating it, they evaluating me, and there is a product manager company fit also, right? So not all product managers are fit for all of roles, you know. So I felt this is the place where I can have my ikigai, if you put it that way, where capabilities, my skill sets, and what the organization needs sort of meets, and I can deliver value.
So if somebody is a PM, they aspire to be you one day, what's your best advice for them?
So I would say improve your product sense, right? So product sense is a very loosely defined term, but product sense is thinking deeply about every product that you interact with. As in the starting point for me, which is just start questioning why something is built in a particular fashion. Try to make your own notes on, let's say, why is LinkedIn having, blue color as the like button, for example, right? Why are the emoticons on the like button very different compared to an Instagram? What would be the reason for it? No, I don't know the reason for it, but these are thought processes that you can think about, which will improve your product sense. There would be consumer psychology reasons. There would be, maybe technical reasons. But why would a professional networking platform have so many emotions on a particular platform, like when Instagram has just one option, right? So it's so different. So now, having your own quests, if I have to put a gaming language there, to finding the truth for every product interaction that you have will help you improve your product sense. And I think product sense is one of the most difficult to learn, but with the right aptitude and focus, the most easiest also to quickly learn your skill sets in. That will help you in the long run.
And we have to talk about AI because AI is disrupting product management. How should PMs be using AI tools in their day-to-day?
I think there is a lot of ground. There's a lot of things which are happening under our feet on the AI space. So the best thing that you can do if you're not working on AI products yourself, and I'm assuming most of these questions are coming from people who are not using AI on their day-to-day life, but I assume most of them are using the GPTs of the world. But that's, I would say, is BA at this point in time. But what I would suggest is, there are so many tutorials available on YouTube on make be a practitioner of AI, because we are talking so much high level about AI at this point in time. Nobody really knows what's happening at the ground level, right? And I would say that this is potentially the right time to relearn, reskill yourself, get your hands dirty, whichever level of the organization that you're in. It's by practicing and doing, small steps that you will get what AI means for you, how it will fit within your, let's say the product ambit that you're in or the organization that you're in, that you will become better at it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us in the center of Bangalore here in Indranagar. If people want to learn more, if they want to follow you online, if they want to help you, what can they do?
Oh, please reach out to me. LinkedIn is where I am available most of the time. So happy to collaborate.
All right, Gautham Krishnan. This is a dream come true of an episode. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aakash. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find out about the podcast. You can find all the past episodes or learn more about the show at product-growth.com. See you in the next episode.